Hi, it's me, Tommy Maloney, host of this podcast, Blending the Family. Before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Blending the Family. Whether it's general life coaching you need or even a speaker for your next event, please head over to the website blendingthefamily.com for the details. Again, blendingthefamily.com, or email me directly, info@blendingthefamily.com. Let's start this episode. Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney, and I am so grateful that Elise Buie is on this episode, and we'll talk more about her in the introduction, but I am so grateful that I don't do a video of the podcast because I have a wicked cold sore on my lip, and it looks so ugly. And between that, oh hi, my name's Tommy Maloney. I'm the host of this podcast. Anyway, it's all about me right now, not about you. And my fur baby Otis, he got a little excited this morning when we were getting ready to go to the dog park. And I was sitting down putting my shoes on, and he jumped up, and not only do I have this ugly cold sore on my upper lip, he scratched me a little on my lower lip, and so I look like a mess. How are you doing? First time coming by? Well, thanks for coming by. This podcast is about blended families. We talk about co-parenting with blended families. We even talk about other topics from time to time. For example, what's a good wine on a first date? But today, Elise Buie is on this podcast, and I've been trying to get her on the podcast for a while. You can find her on all the social. And again, in a little bit, once I get into the intro with her, you'll hear more about Elise Buie. I really don't have a lot to say. I really don't. I am struggling this week because of the cold sore. I was feeling a little bit tired in the beginning of the week, and then I went to the doctor to get my second shot for the shingles vaccine, and that knocked me out. So it's been a rough week. Not to use a pun for dogs. Rough week, get it? Ha 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 ha. So I'm just going to get right into the introduction of Elise Buie. Thanks for coming by, and as Terry Crews would say, your success is my success. Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I'm your host, Tommy Maloney. Today, we have Elise Buie, Esquire. She is a Seattle-based family and divorce lawyer, a founder of the Elise Buie Family Law Group, a survivor of Hurricane Katrina, her own divorce, and many dish-filled sinks piled high after lively family dinners with her husband, Doug, and their beloved blended family. Give it up for blended families. Yeah. Family of 6 teens and 20-something. I think I'm living this with you, Elise. Elise knows firsthand what it means to juggle work and parenting, finding balance in between, even if it means a lot of late nights. When she's not advocating for her clients the best interests of their children and civility in divorce. I think that's an oxymoron, Elise. But anyway, we'll talk about that. You can find her sailing on Puget Sound and hopefully not having her yacht not unattached to the mooring. How's that, Elise? I know you're not like an oligarch, but you know, I'm excited that you have a sailing vessel in the beautiful. I am a huge fan of the Northwest. I'm a huge fan of the Seattle area. A quick story. My wife had never been there. I had a business trip there and I took her with, and we created memories. So Elise, welcome to the podcast, Blending the Family.
Thank you so much for having me, Tommy. I so look forward to this conversation.
I hope so. I hope this is and that's what it is. Just you and I, we're going to talk and have a lot of fun. Before I really get into your background and your work, I have to hit you with a hard-hitting question first, if you're okay with that, Elise.
I'm totally okay with that.
All right. What's a good restaurant you would recommend in the Seattle area?
A good restaurant?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Well, Cafe Juanita, it is, I think, the best restaurant in the entire area. It's in Juanita, which is right next to Kirkland. And they're right on Lake Washington. And Cafe Juanita is an amazing restaurant with just this delicious kind of 6, 7 course pairing menu kind of restaurant. I mean, super fresh ingredients. The chef is just amazing.
I have fond memories of being in Kirkland because I I love wine, and the hotel I was staying at, across from the parking lot, there was the, like, not like a strip mall, but there was these businesses that had little wineries in them, and I got to go over there and I just taste tested my life away. It was beautiful. I love Kirkland. I just love the Northwest.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area.
So let's talk about, one of the things that really drew me to you was something you had posted on LinkedIn, and I'm as of today, we had the big announcement that Elon Musk was buying Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but LinkedIn for me is my bread and butter. And somebody had shared a post, and this is where I really drew my eyeballs to you. And you had posted that you were not going to an event because the way you felt they were treating your husband. Can you talk about that, Elise?
Sure. It was actually a lawyer coaching program, and you travel to their location in Atlanta, and for a couple of days, you're expected to go there, and all the dinners and the activities like that were outside of the coaching, your plus one was not included in those. And I just thought that was really strange, because I'm like, here you are encouraging people to be, you know traveling and going wherever. And I mean, I have thoughts about it just from a business and an entrepreneur standpoint. I mean, if you really are trying to coach an entrepreneur in their work and building their business, I mean, having their spouse both understand what that looks like and also be part of the buy-in of all the work and effort that's going to go into it is hugely beneficial, I think. I mean, any thought that entrepreneurship is this just, super simple 9 to 5 thing, I think is not at all realistic. And I think that spouses, it's really helpful the more they can learn, understand, get to know other people, and just share in the experience, because I mean, it's a pretty intense journey.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I am a huge communicator, advocate with my wife about, what I'm trying to accomplish. And, there are times where she'll just say to me, you got to get your head out of the clouds because you're, sometimes I have these uh, grandeur ideas, and then she just brings me down. But you're so right, because it is not just a partnership with, somebody trying to build a business, but within their own business, they have a partner.
Right. I must say, though, that organization changed their policy after I spoke up, and they have their next quarterly meeting is coming up soon. I can't remember the date, but I unfortunately cannot go. But they have changed it where plus ones are invited to the dinner before the all day coaching session.
Well, that's progress. That's good.
Don't you think? Yeah, I was
Yeah.
super excited. And really, yeah, I mean, it meant a lot to me that they thought about it and did whatever, looked at their own business decisions and probably talked to a lot of people and made that decision. I thought that was awesome. I mean, as a business owner, I personally love when people can point out areas where they think I can do better and give me the opportunity to do better, you know?
One of the things I've noticed about your way of thinking is what you like to call being a unicorn. Why is why are you a unicorn? What is a unicorn, and why is your law firm such a unicorn?
Well, I mean, to me, a unicorn is just like a mythical creature. It doesn't exist. It's this kind of, you think of like unicorns and rainbows, and, it's just this random thing. I mean, our law firm is a unicorn because I think we have an extremely unusual law firm model of I mean, mostly focused on our team. I mean, I have this whole idea from a leadership standpoint that if I just pour everything humanly possible into my team, then my team can pour everything into our clients. And we are a family and estate planning practice. So, those are people going through divorce, or, doing their estate plans, or possibly dealing with probate after a death in their family. And so the more my team can be, their buckets are all filled, and they can then fill the buckets of our clients. I mean, the better off our clients are going to be. And in my world, that means the better off the children are going to be of whatever divorce or, post divorce litigation or thing that might be happening. And so, I mean, I have a huge, huge heart for the children of divorce, not suffering the brunt of it. And so that in my little world, in my little universe, that starts with me creating a firm that is extremely flexible for employees. It's virtual. We do not have mandated billable hours. Like, our team members choose what hours they want to work, so that that fits with their life work integration, not some model of that I have around every single human must work a certain number of hours. I mean, we also have all kinds of things. We have wellness benefits. We have, I mean, our team is, we look for every opportunity possible to connect, where we do, book clubs, we do cooking classes, we do just mixers where we come together and break out into small groups. Um, I mean, we have this robust Slack universe where we have channels that have nothing to do with the practice of law. Like, we have joy channels, we have like the murder channel, which is all about people in crime dramas. We have parenting channels. Just, I mean, we're just a very human focused firm, I think, that really puts people in the as the front of all things.
Where did this unicorn concept come from for you?
It came in my head of just when I was starting. When I started the firm in 2015, it was just me and two other people. And I, at that point, had children at home, who were involved in all kinds of activities and things. And I remember when I was starting the firm thinking, like, I cannot sit in an office all day, like from 8 to 6, and actually be the mom I need to be. So when I started the firm, I started it virtually and had an office in my home, and then also had an office in downtown Seattle, and very much encouraged me and the two other people that we could just work wherever. We didn't have to be tied to a desk, and that wasn't an important part of what we did, and that we just needed to, get the work done. And so that allowed me to be involved. I mean, I was the football mom, the lacrosse mom, the booster club, mom. Like, I was always involved in a lot of my kid things. And so that allowed me to do that. And then interestingly, it all kind of fed on itself because I was so involved in a lot of the my kids' activities. So I would, advertise in the high school football booster program or whatever, and then I would get more business. So, I mean, the firm was like growing based on my involvement in the community, and it became this really interesting thing to watch happen and to watch that growth occur. And I focused on hiring moms who were coming back into the workforce, because I had, I guess, a special place in my heart for that. Because when I went to come back into the workforce, it was really hard. And a lot of firms looked at me and they were like, well, you have too much experience. Like, you were a federal law clerk and you worked in this bigger law firm for several years. You don't want to come work here. And how will you, be junior to this associate who's younger than you? And I was always like, I mean, I was home for a decade, educating my children and having children. And I thought, of course, I would be junior to whoever this associate is. Like, I don't have any age issues or whatever. Like, I don't know, but it was a real hard thing to get back into the workforce having taken off for a decade. And so I was very focused on bringing women in who were trying to balance both of those. And then by offering that flexibility that allowed people to come in, and our firm has really, it's grown a lot over the years and very precipitously since COVID. I think that flexibility and being virtual for years before COVID really gave us a leg up because, we didn't have to shift anything or do anything different. We were already functioning in that virtual world.
You were already ahead of the game.
Yeah.
I just want to go back because, as a former stay-at-home dad, I had those same similar issues going back to the workforce. And, I'd be sitting there across the desk from HR and they'd be like, why do you have this gap in your resume? And I'm like, I was home with my son. They're like, why? I said, well, my wife at the time was the major breadwinner, so it only made sense. And they're still looking at me like I have a third eye. And so it gets frustrating because it's like we're trying to be good parents, and you're telling me that I'm not a good parent because I stayed home with my kid. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think that gap on the resume, I mean, up until COVID, and a lot of this stuff has really been brought to the forefront by a lot of different, thought leaders. I mean, that gap on the resume was a killer for anyone with that gap on the resume. And now I think we're slowly seeing people really celebrate that gap on the resume and put it out there and talk about all the skills that one has. I mean, I know, as a stay-at-home dad, there's a lot of stuff that is learned and seriously helpful skill sets are developed in your role as a stay-at-home parent.
And it's funny you say that because you really don't think about it because you're just going through in my world, I was just going through the motions because um, in my experience or lack of experience, I was an only child. I never babysat, and so when I approached my former spouse and I said, "This is what I want to do," because um, I just wanted to be a dad, and she's like, "Well, if this doesn't work out, I'm close by and I can always come home." I'm like, "All right, but no, I don't want a net. I don't want a safety net. I want to do this." But again, to your point, you're learning, time management skills, and you're learning, you know, uh, not just time management, but in a weird way, cooking skills. Even though you're, heating up bottles, but at the same time, you're trying to make sure you're not burning the heck out of your kid's mouth. So there are so many different, life skills that, you're inside it, but you don't really think about it. And then you go back to the workforce going, oh, I can do that. I can do that because I was just doing this and this, which might not be totally comparable, but I can do that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's a lot, I mean, a lot of people who stay at home, and I'm sure it depends on the years they stay at home and all that. I mean, I look at the amount of things I did as a stay-at-home parent. I mean, I got involved in community fundraising projects. I, was president of my kids' swim team. Um, I mean, all kinds of things that I did. I mean, that were very helpful in developing and further, exploring the skills that I had.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of piggyback on that and going into a little bit more of your life as a blended family. W- What did you create in order to create a successful blended family? And for example, my wife and I, what we did was number one, we had a pact that if the kids didn't get along, we weren't going to continue dating because that's not fair to the kids. The other thing we did was uh, we dated for a while, for a few months, and then when the time came to have the kids meet, my son, her two daughters, what we did was we did it at a neutral location. We didn't do it at a restaurant because my wife and I both felt that if you put them in a restaurant setting, now you're forcing them to create
Right.
conversation and dialogue. And that's, again, not fair to them. So what we did was we just went to an outdoor ice skating rink. Worst case
Oh,
scenario, if it didn't work out, guess what? We could go shopping or we can go get ice cream, which we did. Well, gelato. So what did you do to create your successful blended family?
well, I have to tell you, I mean, again, then I hate to use this word, I mean, but we are a serious unicorn blended family because we knew each other years before we came together as a couple. So my current husband's name is Doug, and he had two daughters, and they lived down the street from us in New Orleans for years. And so we were both married, you know, at the time to our respective exes. I had four kids. Well, at the time I only had three. He had two. Um, Actually, when we met, I only had two, but his daughters spent huge amounts of time at my house. They were friends with my two oldest children. And so, and I mean, very close with me. So we were, you know, very close and friendly. And then they moved away, you know, and we both were still married and everything was all fine. And they moved away. We stayed in New Orleans. They moved away. They both were in the military. And then we just kept up with the family over the years as friends. And then when we both found out that we were divorcing, when Doug and I found out that we each were divorcing like 10 years later, then we came together, and so our kids already knew each other. And so obviously they didn't know each other as older people, you know, it had been a long time, but it wasn't a super difficult thing, you know, to do that blending. And so and his daughters were older, and so one of them was already gone to college and just one was left at home. And so I would say from that perspective, from that moment in time when we did come together, the biggest thing we did, kind of like you all almost exactly, is we didn't force things. Like we were very, very flexible around things like if we were going to celebrate, let's say, one of my son's birthdays, it wasn't mandatory that his two daughters had to come as well. You know, like if they wanted to come, 100% they were welcome and invited, and you know, we would get feedback on where people wanted to go, but it was totally fine if they didn't want to go. And we just, you know, because we were looking at teenagers, at least four, trying to think how old they all were. Four of them were teenagers at the time we came together. And I mean, I don't know how old all your children are, but four teenagers can be kind of snarly. And so, you know, you've got to give them some agency in this. And so
Well,
that is what we
that
did.
was, yeah, that was a life lesson for me going from being, having just a son, a boy. Uh, well, my wife would accuse me of being a boy as well, but we'll save that for another episode. So when I would spend time with the girls, they were they were in junior high, and the oldest Betsy, she is your A personality. So that typical, I've come home, get my homework done, and move on. Her sister Becca, that was where I really had to learn how to parent as far as taking a step back, because with Becca it was she'd come home, she wanted to decompress, turn on the TV, just chill out. And I'm so used to seeing her sister, I'm like, no, you're supposed to be doing your homework. You're not supposed to have TV on. And it again, it took me a while to realize, nope, different personalities. Again, having just one son and also being an only child, I really had to observe these two girls in their different elements and go, okay, I get it now. But it was such a learning experience from the point of view of, again, going from just a boy to two girls.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, night and day different.
Oh, it really is. And the first summer that when my wife and I got married, we had um, my wife's niece move in with us. So there was a lot of estrogen in the house. And as a as an introvert, when there's I can just feel myself when there's too many people in the house. It's like our dog Otis, when he and I go to the dog park, and I can feel there's too much energy. There's too many dogs. I and he can sense it too. It's like, all right, it's time to leave. And when that estrogen would just become too much for me, luckily my home office is downstairs, and so is the wine refrigerator. So, hence to say, come downstairs, grab a bottle of wine, and just chill out and just take a break.
Oh yeah, well, knowing that about yourself and being able to take those breaks, I think is really important when you're dealing with a blended family. I mean, one thing we did when we bought a house was we bought a house that had three floors. So the boys were on the very bottom floor and my husband and I were on the top floor. So there was a floor between us, which was really helpful in that teen time, with boys blaring music and whatever else, because my husband was definitely used to, two girls, which were just quieter. I mean, it was just a different level of activity. And he, like you, is an introvert. And I think that, all that just, and my boys were all football players, lacrosse players. Like, I mean, these are high strung, you know what I mean? Active, loud boys.
Yeah,
And
my son plays hockey, so I feel you.
yeah, you do. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the funny thing is, when you're incorporating a boy into the girls' world, then you've got unique smells also coming from the boy. That's actually his nickname, the boy. That's what the girls call him. So, his hockey equipment just has a very unique odor.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure it ranks up there with that football equipment.
Exactly. Exactly. Staying on the topic of blended families and, your law firm, I saw this quote that you had posted on LinkedIn, and it says, if blending families were as easy as blending a margarita, we would all be better off. What advice, especially and I was really drawn to this because I didn't even think about this, but again, going back to your law firm, talking about estate planning, what can we blended families, or what the question is, what should we learn? What should we know, either before we get married or right now as we're already in the blended family world?
Well, one thing I always recommend to people, who are embarking on this blended family journey is there's a book called the Step Family Handbook written by Karen Bonnell, and it is, I think, an amazing read on, helping people understand some of the dynamics, because I think so many people don't appreciate all those dynamics and they don't understand how, feelings get hurt, and how, you know the step parent cannot take over the parenting, and how, if and obviously these things are all contingent on the facts of each case. Like, if there is a healthy, normal, psychologically sound parent somewhere else, you know certain things need to be, there needs to be space for that person to be the parent, and for the step parent to truly be in that step parent bonus parent role, not in taking over and And so there's so many dynamics, and I think the more people can understand the dynamics and how a child feels about these, and the Step Family Handbook really helps go through a lot of that. I mean, the author, like I said, is Karen Bonnell, who also wrote the Coparenting Handbook. I mean, she is an expert on child development, and so has just really amazing insight into the emotional part of all this, because there's just so much emotions that go into blending a family. And I do think also parents forget the people who are newly married. They're all happy and they think everything is so happy. And it's like you have to really understand that the child often feels, that this is negative, and that it's like the sign that their parents are never going to get back together. And again, it depends on the child's developmental stage, how the child might be navigating it. But I mean, the parents have got to be emotionally attuned to the child's needs and feelings. And I think the more they can do that, the better. And the more the bio parent can have that one-on-one time with their children, I think is very, very helpful. And in creating those opportunities so that that bio parent can stay clued in, because that's going to be the biggest success of the blended family, is that there is one parent that is truly emotionally connected, so they know what these children need. um, and if parents are oblivious to what the kids really need, that's when you start seeing, all kinds of acting out and all kinds of problems.
Yeah, one of the things I highly recommend to blended families, especially in the beginning stages. One of the things one of my bonus daughters and I used to do when she was younger was her and I would do date nights. Her and I would go out for dinner. The other thing too is there was, I think it was like on Mondays when I was home, and if I wasn't traveling, I'd pick her up from school, and then her and I would stop and get ice cream, just to build that bond between her and I. And I feel that sometimes, in my view, sometimes the non-bio parent doesn't look at the kids because they're non-blood as their kids, and that's where I just get on my high horse, and then I get on a soapbox on top of my high horse and say, no, this is your family. These are
Yeah.
your kids, regardless of who birthed them. They're still part of your family.
Oh, absolutely, they are. And yeah, I mean, and I think that, so much of the success of a blended family goes back to those ex spouses, and how are those relationships, and what do they look like? And does that ex spouse, trust and respect the new spouse? I mean, there's just, the dynamics are endless, and the possibilities of pitfalls are endless, but I mean, in the best blended families, if you've got four emotionally intelligent adults and they're able to truly put their children's needs first, I mean, the children can highly benefit from those bonus parents, that they're exposed to and that they have as part of their lives. But obviously, the flip side is having emotionally unintelligent adults just creating conflict and wreaking havoc on the children's lives.
I'll tell you, I remember when my son was, I think we were still in the dating stages with my wife, and I was coaching uh, hockey at the time. And after one of his games, my wife and my bonus daughters, were there. And after the game, my wife pulled me aside and said, I had a very interesting conversation with your former wife. I said, uh oh. And I'm like, going, uh oh. And she said, no. It came up to her, introduced herself, and said that um, my son had been talking a lot about the girls in a positive way. And it sounded like, from my former spouse's point of view, that she was helping and encouraging it. And so it was nice to have that versus the conflict between her and I, that
Oh, yeah.
because of what we were trying to create as a blended family before we all got together. But at the same time, again, putting the kids' needs first, and not having to draw a line in the sand with your former spouse.
Oh, it is. I mean, that is so critical. I always say if you can put the kids' needs front and center rather than have them caught in the middle, I mean, your children just win. And because it is not the two homes that cause children problems, it is the conflict. And if parents could really learn and appreciate that and understand how much impact their lack of conflict has on their children's psychological well being, I mean, children would benefit so much more than they do now. And I mean, it is, it's a thing as a professional in the divorce world. I mean, I constantly am talking to people about, focusing on your children's best interests and maximizing your children and loving your child more than you hate your ex, and really helping people understand how the conflict harms their children, because most parents have no intent on harming their children on purpose. And if they can understand how the conflict damages their child, a lot of times parents can get their act together and do better.
Yeah, and it goes back to, co-parenting 101. Don't put the kids in the middle. Don't
Yeah.
make them the messenger.
Yeah. Absolutely. And don't have them choose between one of you, and loving one of you, or, choosing between their bio parent and the step parent. I mean, helping a child see the positive attributes of each adult in their life is what the children need, because each adult is bringing some strength to that child and to the development of that child, and helping the child see those strengths and be able to glean what they can from those strengths is the name of the game.
I want to piggyback on what you just said. So, what did Doug bring to your boys?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's funny you asked that today. I just got back from a weekend in Florida with two of my boys and Doug. And I mean, we spent an hour with my 25-year-old son, literally telling Doug how much he meant to him through the years. And I mean, Doug has been a voice of reason and calm. And I mean, as my son said on Friday night, that Doug he is the last chivalrous man standing in the
I'm
world.
I'm
Um,
gonna have to disagree.
yeah.
I think I'm pretty chivalrous, but
But for my sons, they've watched Doug just be an amazing partner and equitable partner in our home, helping with all things, including all things related to them, attending sporting events, bringing them to things, helping cooking, grocery shopping, just, really being an equal partner. I mean, as I've been, building this, pretty big law firm. And, so it's not like Doug was, and Doug has a big job himself. And so, but they have watched this, and they have watched him also bring this level of patience and calm to them. So, like, as typical teenagers are, they have really fluctuating emotions. And I mean, Doug is probably the most calm, steady human I know. I mean, he's a retired Coast Guard captain, after like 28 years in the military. And he definitely learned that, compartmentalization thing they practice, I think, in the military. And he didn't ride any of those waves with the kids. I mean, he always just brought this sense of reason, and calm, which I think for boys in their teen years, I mean, it was just, I mean, invaluable to watching my boys develop. And I mean, they all three of my sons have taken on many of Doug's qualities in that regard. And everyone in the family has just watched them develop. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about what Doug has brought to my children. I mean, he truly has been an amazing amazing stepfather.
And no pun intended when you mentioned waves and Coast Guard.
Yeah. No, and as I'm sitting here looking out the window right now at my waves that are growing in the Puget Sound.
Nice. So one of the things I've always tried to give credit to my bonus dad, and it was a situation where he really wasn't teaching me, but I just picked things up.
Yeah.
Where do you think Doug got that inner innate to be what I would like to say is, a lot of, not to generalize, but a lot of men, when they get into those new relationships, they come in and it's their way or the highway, and my bonus dad never did that. Where do you
Yeah.
think Doug learned that?
It's interesting. I actually don't know where he learned it, but he very early on vocalized that he was like, there are things that you do and you parent with your children that I would not do. That if it were up to me, I would do it differently. He's like, but who am I to say that my way is any better than your way? And he's like, these four children so well. And I mean, one thing, that anybody who knows me, I mean, my children and I are exceedingly, we are very connected. I mean, I am very emotionally attuned to my children's needs. And Doug felt very strongly that, what he needed to do was to back me up. And if he needed to talk to me about anything at all, like maybe he would want to share something with me, he would definitely do it privately, where the children didn't ever sense any anything but total alignment. I mean, actually one of the kids actually called us a double-headed monster one time, and we both just laughed and laughed at that. We thought it was kind of like beautiful. I was like,
That's
no,
a compliment.
I know. I was just like, I think we won the blended family game here. It was like the double-headed monster absolutely wins the day. And so but Doug was just, I mean, he would always back me up, but he wasn't looking for ways to back me up. I mean, he just very much empowered me to parent my children, so it wasn't like he felt he had to step in and do things all the time. He empowered me to parent the kids, and if there was ever a time that it was clear I needed some backup, he would offer it, but it was never like I never felt like anybody was looking to him to kind of, be the final vote or the tiebreaker in anything. It was always, I was definitely the parent and Doug was the bonus parent, and they just all knew that they could count on Doug for certain things. I mean, he was just going to bring this sense of just calm, rational, problem solving type behavior to everything. And I think, like you said, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, they watched him, as kids do. They watch those adults around him and they just learned so much. I mean, I actually have a blog on my website written by one of my sons. He wrote it probably when he was about 20, talking about what he did learn from his stepfather. And, when we read that, I was really taken aback. I mean, very positively, but just to see what a child can say about, how watching this person in their life has meant so much to them.
One of the things I've took from a lot of your content is something that we're very similar with, uh, the whole fathering together, guys. Um, why do you have such a vested interest in positive fatherhood?
Well, I think it is just critical to children's well being. I mean, all the social science research tells us that children, like I think it's 0 to 9, they really do need their moms, like mostly in that age range. Whereas 9 to 20, they need their dads. Like, I mean, everything tells us that a positive fathering relationship with a child is just such a protective factor for the child's long-term well-being. And truly, I think if fathers step up, and I mean, I'm such a huge fan of Eve Rodsky's Fair Play. I think if more families used fair play and homes had more gender equity in them in all the work of parenting, I think my business would decrease because I think there would be less divorce, which in my mind, that would be a very positive thing. I think many families bust up because of the complete um, inequity in homes. And I think women just get so burned out from what they do. And obviously, I'm being stereotypical. It's mostly women, and the stats would say women do the majority of this invisible labor. But I know in some homes, it's obviously not that way. But I just think that, I mean, I think good dads are, I mean, it just benefits our whole entire society. And I mean, I think if dads took their leave from work more, if dads talked about parenting more in the work environment, I think it would help men and women's work. I think women would um, get paid more equally. I mean, I think all kinds of things about positive fathering.
Well, Michelle Travis, are you familiar with her?
I don't know if I am.
Michelle Travis is a professor of law at University of San Francisco School of Law, and she's also on that. I hate to say bandwagon, but it's um, getting uh, a national paid parenting leave, and
Yep.
it gets really frustrating because as being a stay at home parent, and there's a lot of us that were stay at home parents, and you really did have to count on you know the big thing, budgeting, and making sure that if you are trying to be a stay-at-home parent, how do you justify the bills, and how do you justify um, not having, in my situation, I worked part-time at nights, which it ended up being close to 40 hours. But my wife at the time, my first wife, she had a great job, great income, so we were able to afford the fact that I wasn't working full time. So paid parenting leave is such it's just astounding that our country doesn't have it.
Yep. Completely. And I mean, it's just, I mean, the impact it has, across all things, I mean, it's just pretty, it's abhorrent, actually. I mean, it really is. I don't know. There's so many things around the paid leave and what needs to happen. I mean, it is a massive ongoing, issue. I mean, I actually was in a class with I think his name is Brian, the Fathering, Together.
Brian Anderson.
Um, Yes, he and I did the Fair Play facilitator class together. And it was fascinating to listen to, the perspectives of some of the fathers in that class, and, some of the things that they went through in their own work, by being an engaged father and trying to step up and be that, kind of equal parent in the home. And obviously, I see it in divorce all the time, where people will come in and they're like, oh, well, I should have full custody of the kids because, he's been working all the time. And I'm like, well, that's great. That's what you all set up in your family. Like, that was a decision you all made based on economics. That does not mean that he cannot parent. I'm like, unless he is, abusive to the children, and there's some, standout mental health problem or drug and alcohol, I'm like, he can learn parenting just like you learned parenting, you know? Um, and so, but that becomes its own thing in divorce, where people will kind of create a narrative around, oh, well, since I'm the one that stayed home for a few years, I should have more of the custody.
Yeah, and I'm sure in your world it gets a little dicey, having to mediate that.
Completely. Well, I mean, trying again, it's that piece of educating the parents on trying to keep a child away from their other parent for whatever reasons people do that. And obviously, the reasons are, as diverse as people are. But in most cases, it is simply harmful to the child. Um, and helping people understand how developing these positive relationships with both parents, how that actually benefits the child and is a protective factor against things like, school issues later on, drug and alcohol abuse, teen pregnancy. I mean, there's all kinds of studies out there around, how positive it is for children to have those healthy relationships with both parents. But so many people are fearful in that divorce process, and they instead of seeing, oh, my child's going to go have a great time with the other parent, it's like somehow it's taking away from them, and it's like, they're this big loss. And there's a lot of education that has to go into it to help people really be able to put their children front and center.
Oh, I agree. Well, Lisa, I want to respect your time. And before I get to the last question, tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you and your unicorn law firm.
Well, the law firm is Elise Buie Family Law Group. And I mean, you can just find us online. And, you can also contact me through the law firm. And obviously, you can just go online and in all the social media. And I mean, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I myself have two podcasts. I run the Maximum Mom podcast, which is for lawyers, moms, and entrepreneurs, and then I also do a Parenting Buoy podcast, which is very focused on the Pacific Northwest and parenting resources out here, including a lot of work around Eve Rodsky's book Fair Play, as well as Find Your Unicorn Space. um, so I really appreciate the time we've had today, Tommy. I mean, I love talking about blended families because boy, are there a lot of us walking around. And it is such an interesting dynamic to navigate, and yet it can be a minefield for certain families.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not are you dealing with, your own family dynamics, but you're also, your spouse is dealing with their former spouse, you're dealing with your former spouse, and it's just gets crazy.
It it does. It can, that's for sure. I mean, I knock on wood almost every day, feel super blessed. I mean, my husband's ex-wife is just a lovely human. I respect her just to the ends of the earth. She's been an amazing mom, and they have raised these amazing daughters, and I can only offer the tiniest bit of, bonus support to them. Um, but I mean, I just feel very blessed, and I know that that is not always how it plays out.
um, no comment, Your Honor. So, Elise, your final question is: what are you looking forward to tomorrow? What are you looking forward to tomorrow?
Well, I mean, actually, very specifically, what am I looking forward to tomorrow?
Sure.
Is I'm actually meeting one of my past employees who was with me for years, and she moved on to a different place. And she and I are going to meet tomorrow and spend happy hour together. So I'm super happy to do that. Yeah,
That is definitely something to look
I
forward
love
to.
that. Absolutely. Well, and I think in the bigger picture, like, again, entrepreneurs, you have people kind of on your bus doing, work with you and being on your team, and then they might develop and go do something else. And so many people get kind of upset about that rather than really encouraging people to just go do their next best thing and be their next best self. And I love the contact I have with my former team members, and the relationships we've built. I don't know, it just makes me happy because I think maximizing the people around me on my team is one of my greatest joys.
Perfect. I think that's a positive way to end our conversation. So, Elise Buie, thank you so much for your time today. Keep putting out some great content on LinkedIn. Like I said, I love LinkedIn.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. Well, I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.